2:48 a.m. the Eastern Black Sea. A 1,500-pound warhead just slammed into the side of the Russian frigate Admiral Essen. The hull tore open. The ship's main computer went dark in 3 seconds. That's the kill shot. Without power, the million-dollar radars are just dead glass. 6 miles away, a USP-8 Poseidon is circling at 25,000 feet, feeding live GPS coordinates straight to the next Ukrainian drone. On the coast, a Russian S-400 surface-to-air missile system just powered up. Russia is fighting back. 250 Shahed drones are launching from the Crimean coast. They are heading for the Ukrainian cities that launched the attack. On the water, a single Russian AK-630 Gatling gun starts screaming, spitting 4,000 rounds of lead a minute into the dark. But the gun is aimless. It's shooting at ghosts because its radar is gone. A second Sea Baby surface drone is closing the gap at 50 miles per hour. It hits the Admiral Essen's stern right where the propellers meet the hull. The back of the ship breaks open. The flagship of the fleet is now a 400-foot floating metal coffin. And the U.S. Navy just signaled that this is only the beginning. The P-8 Poseidon is a converted airliner, a Boeing 737, but instead of passengers, it's packed with the most expensive sensors in the U.S. arsenal. It sits 25,000 feet above the Black Sea, acting as the U.S. Navy's high-altitude eyes, feeding data back to the Ukrainian drone controllers on the ground. But the air over the Black Sea is no longer a neutral zone. A fast-moving contact appears on the P-8's radar. It's coming from the Crimean coast. A Russian Su-27 flanker. The Su-27 executes a cold intercept. The Russian pilot uses his infrared search and track system, a heat-seeking eye on the nose of the jet, to find the massive thermal signature of the P-8's 2 jet engines. The U.S. aircraft is a sitting duck. It has no missiles for self-defense. Its only protection is the thin layer of international status. That status evaporates the moment the Su-27 pulls within 50 feet of the U.S. jet's wingtip. The Russian fighter is so close that its engine exhaust is hitting the P-8's flight surfaces. The U.S. jet begins to shake. If the wings touch, both planes will disintegrate in midair. But the Russian pilot isn't looking for a collision. He's looking for a kill that he can claim was an accident. The Su-27 suddenly accelerates. It pulls directly in front of the P-8's nose, then the fighter releases its flare dispensers. These aren't normal flares. They are magnesium-tipped kinetic decoys. When the Su-27 kicks them out, they aren't falling away. Because the fighter is directly in front of the U.S. jet, the magnesium blocks are sucked straight into the P-8's left engine. The titanium blades inside the jet engine are spinning. When the solid magnesium flares hit those blades, it's like throwing a handful of bricks into a blender. The engine explodes. The left wing of the P-8 is suddenly a sheet of fire. Inside the U.S. jet, the main alarm sounds. The left engine is gone. The fire is eating into the hydraulic lines that control the tail. If those lines melt, the plane will flip over and dive straight into the sea. The P-8 begins a desperate, slow descent. It has to drop into the thicker air to blow out the fire. It falls from the sky at 4,000 feet per minute. A terrifying, controlled crash. But Russia isn't finished. On the coast of Crimea, a battery of S-400 Triumph missiles, Russia's most advanced long-range air defense system, powers up its Big Bird radar. It sends out a high-energy beam that sticks to the crippled U.S. jet like a spotlight. On the screens of the P-8, a red light begins to flash. It means the S-400 computer has already calculated the flight path of the missile. The window for rescue is closing. 30 miles away, a USKC-135 Stratotanker, a flying gas station, is rushing toward the P-8 to provide support and radio relay. But as soon as the S-400 radar locks onto the crippled jet, it also swings its beam toward the tanker. The message is clear: if you try to help, you die next. The KC-135 is forced to turn away. This leaves the P-8 completely alone, on fire and falling toward the water. Russia just took out the U.S. Navy's eyes without firing a single missile. Suddenly, a new sound fills the P-8's cockpit. It's the sound of the Su-27 coming back for a second pass. The 30mm cannon on the Su-27 fires, shells the size of beer bottles. One burst would tear the P-8's tail off. The Russian pilot is watching the U.S. jet struggle. But then, from the Ukrainian coast, two R-360 Neptune anti-ship missiles launch into the air. They are aimed at the S-400 radar station on the coast. The S-400 battery commander has a choice: keep the lock on the U.S. jet and die when the Neptune hits his radar, or turn the radar off and hide. He turns it off. The red light on the P-8's dashboard goes out, but the plane is still on fire. The Su-27 is still behind them, and the engine fire is now reaching the fuel tanks in the wing. While the burning US P-8 Poseidon struggles to stay in the sky, a new sound begins to roll across the Black Sea. This is the Russian counterstrike. It is a wall of steel, 250 Shade 136 drones launching in a single massive wave. Think of a swarm of locusts, but made of plastic, fuel, and 40 pounds of high explosives. Each drone is cheap, but when you launch 250 at once, they become a physical force. The goal is to force the Ukrainian air defenses to use every bullet and every missile until they have nothing left. On the outskirts of Odessa, a Ukrainian Gepard anti-aircraft tank senses the swarm. The Gepard is a masterpiece of Cold War engineering, a tank chassis topped with two 35mm autocannons and a high-speed tracking radar. The Gepard opens fire. The twin cannons spit out 35mm shells at a rate of 1,100 rounds per minute. Each shell is programmed to explode just feet in front of a drone, releasing a cloud of 152 tungsten pellets. One drone disintegrates, then another, then a third. For 60 seconds, the Gepard is a wall of fire, creating a shield of lead that no drone can pass. The Gepard carries 640 rounds of anti-air ammunition. At full speed, it can fire for less than 40 seconds before the magazines are empty. The drone swarm is 250 strong. They are sending drones into the path of the guns specifically to die, and the Gepard's guns suddenly stop. The magazines are empty. The crew is frantically trying to reload, but it takes minutes to winches the heavy shells back into the turret. Outside, the swarm is still coming. The drones that survive the first line of defense aren't heading for the front lines. They are heading for the vitals. They track toward the massive fuel storage tanks in the port of Odessa. The first drone hits a 5 million gallon diesel tank. The plastic wings of the drone shatter, but the warhead triggers instantly. The steel wall of the tank, 3 inches thick, vanishes in a white-hot flash. Without that diesel, the Ukrainian tanks at the front can't move. 3 miles away, a Ukrainian S-300 surface-to-air missile battery tries to intervene. This is a heavy system designed to kill high-speed jets. It launches a missile the size of a telephone pole. The missile hits a drone and vaporizes it. But a single S-300 missile cost $1 million. The drone it just killed cost $20,000. Russia is forcing Ukraine to go bankrupt just to stay alive. The drone swarm begins to split. 100 drones stay over Odessa, keeping the air defenses busy. The other 150...
This is a developing global crisis with rapidly escalating military, diplomatic, and economic fallout. Here is a structured breakdown of the most critical developments from the situation. The maritime blockade and major diplomatic flare-up. The U.S. military is aggressively enforcing a strict blockade initiated on April 13th, aimed at starving Iran of oil revenue. However, this has triggered a severe diplomatic dispute with India, due to the heavy toll on Indian seafarers crewed on foreign-flagged tankers. The attack on Mount Jalvir, Thursday, U.S. forces targeted the Guinea-Bissau-flagged vessel Mount Jalvir in the Gulf of Oman, firing 2 Hellfire missiles into its engine room to disable it. It was the third commercial ship with an Indian crew hit by American forces in just 4 days. Thankfully, all 20 Indian sailors on board were reported safe and evacuated to Shiraz, Oman. Tragic fatalities on Mount Settebello, Wednesday. The Indian government confirmed that 3 missing Indian crew members were found dead, following a U.S. military strike on the Palau-flagged tanker Mount Settebello a day prior. India's response. New Delhi has lodged a strong protest and summoned the U.S. Deputy Chief of Mission. While India noted that 2 of the targeted ships were under U.S. OFAC sanctions, and another was flagged as non-compliant, the Indian Ministry of External Affairs called the continuing attacks on shipping deeply worrisome and demanded they cease. Escalating military strikes and political rhetoric. The military exchanges are rapidly moving the US and Iran past their previous limits, rendering the fragile April ceasefire effectively dead. The US position: President Trump stated that the strikes are designed to enforce a peace deal on American terms. On social media, he warned that the US will hit Iran very hard tonight, and threatened a future military takeover of Karg Island, the vital heart of Iran's oil economy. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth summarized the aggressive posture, stating, "If we need to negotiate with bombs, we'll negotiate with bombs." Iran's retaliation. In response to the 4-hour American bombardment targeting southern Iranian hubs like Bandar Abbas and Qeshm, Iran launched 2 waves of missile attacks targeting U.S. military bases in Kuwait and Bahrain. Strait of Hormuz status. Iran declared the strategic Strait of Hormuz closed to all commercial and oil vessels. The U.S. military has disputed this claim, stating the strait remains open. Global spillover effects. The conflict is sending shockwaves through the international community and global markets. Regional disruption. Kuwait temporarily closed its civilian airspace during the Iranian missile waves, and emergency sirens were activated across Bahrain. Economic blowback. The World Bank slashed its global growth forecast for 2026 down to 2.5%, explicitly warning that energy price shocks from the war are dragging global growth to its weakest pace since the COVID-19 pandemic. Monetary action. In response to spiking inflation directly tied to the conflict, the European Central Bank (ECB) aggressively raised interest rates.